So, hello. Big hello for everyone who's subscribed recently to our little channel. It does amuse me. As we speak, we have 186 subscribers, which is actually phenomenal, and I'm very grateful for everyone who's subscribed and everyone who watches these videos. Thank goodness I'm not just doing it into just an empty void with no interest whatsoever. But then when you consider that what it is that we're talking about, in a way it's not surprising that not that many people are going to be interested. It's difficult to get your head around. But then when you consider that people who have channels dedicated to the philosophy of that the world is flat and they're getting tens of thousands of subscribers, it does kind of put a context on what we're doing here. However, I'm very grateful, thank you, for sticking around and hanging around and being interested in this particular subject, Paticca Samuppada. What I wanted to do with this video was go back and talk about what I was talking about at the end of the last video. The last video was on ignorance, the underlying cause of the whole problem of suffering. And in the last Wednesday night meeting we had here, I was asked about this whole notion of stopping the wheel, which is what I was discussing. And I thought it would be really interesting, or I'd just quite like to go through stopping all over again and explain it. Try to shed more light on why the Buddha created this whole narrative and the techniques behind his theories and philosophies, and why we approach it in the way that we do. And it's a very deep reason why we have to go about it this way. So if we take it from the point of view of having stopped, there always is truth. The way things really are is never hidden from us. We ignore it. So with the stopping of this wheel of Paticca Samuppada, there is nothing stopping, because ignorance is being stopped, the tendency to ignore is being stopped. There is nothing to prevent the recognition of that which has always been. The truth which does not alter, that is not subject to conditions, which is unoriginated, and because it is unoriginated, in contradistinction to every element of existence other than this, because it is unoriginated, it does not die. So it is an apprehension and comprehension of truth. However, it must necessarily remain outside of our ability to communicate it, because whenever we communicate, we need words, and words delineate experience into concrete, separate things. So you have thingness, and immediately you've done that, you have then the arising and the passing away of phenomena, of objects, of things, and you're back in the whole whirligig of samsaric experience, of duality. So there is this understanding which is self-evident, no pun intended. It is obvious once it's no longer being ignored. The problem is, even in declaring that there is this transcendent, this understanding which transcends the flow of conscious experience, of course, in one's unenlightened state, one considers that to be an understanding, a knowledge, which we are not in possession of, and we wish to be in possession of it. So we've got a problem, because now we've got something that we don't have that we want. So we set about trying to obtain it. But if you've understood anything from our discussions of Paticca Samuppada, any willful action, any volition taken with a view of self must produce a result. That result necessarily arises. It's inherently unsatisfactory, uncontrollable, it arises, it passes away. So the very attempt to realize enlightenment is flawed by the very attempt to realize enlightenment. So this puts us in a cat's cradle, in an impossible situation. It is literally one hand clapping and all of that. How do you resolve this problem? The very attempt to discover truth perpetuates ignorance. And yet, how is ignorance to be resolved without searching? Head scratching time. So that's an impossible situation, and yet it is possible to overcome it. So, irrespective of what tradition it is, whether it's a path teaching like Buddhism, or a non-path, non-teacher like Krishnamurti, Jiji Krishnamurti, who was alive in India in the 20th century and was an amazing enlightened sage. He said, truth is a pathless land. There is no path that can take you to truth for this very reason. However, everyone is in agreement with, and Krishnamurti included, that there has to be, prior to the realization of what always is, there has to be a prior spontaneous, unself-conscious surrender, letting go, stopping, giving up. So now we've got a new problem, because what people then try to do is they try to mimic that by deliberately stopping. But deliberately stopping is actually another form of becoming, because it's being done from a self-centered orientation, which is, I want to discover truth. They tell me that no form of action that I perform can produce truth, therefore I need to stop, therefore I will stop. But that is actually more becoming. It is still being done out of the self-centered, understandably, but still self-orientated attempt to possess, to cause, to create the right circumstances whereby truth will be revealed. So this is a very knotty problem. So you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. This knowledge exists all the time. It's right here, right now. You ignore it, but there is nothing you can do to stop ignore it except this spontaneous letting go, wherein in the letting go there is the revelation of truth. The Buddha completely understood this dilemma. Of course he did. He's the Buddha. His whole teaching is designed to bring about this very stopping, this spontaneous letting go. But he isn't doing what non-path people say, which it's just, it just happens when it's right. There's no rhyme or reason. It would just happen when it happens, and it's just your story, and there's nothing you can do. I disagree with that fundamentally, based on my experience, which is through undertaking Buddhist insight meditation, of undertaking a formal investigation and exploration of my conscious experience, of observing the true nature of all the phenomena, all possible phenomena that arise and pass away in experience. That process and that progress of insight brought the mind to a point where that stopping was able to take place. And the stopping, when it took place, was entirely spontaneous. So let me explain how it was for me. So I'd gone through the entirety of the insight training, all 4 paths: stream winning, once returning, non-returning, and the Arahant path. Final fruition on the Arahant path was completed, and yet there was this one last dilemma. Is this enlightenment or is it not enlightenment? Okay, just showing you my cards here. Whether you believe it or not is frankly immaterial. I'm just stating it for the sake of stating it, and whether you want to take it seriously or not is entirely up to you. So what I'd seen on the insight path, how transient, ungraspable and uncontrollable all elements of all possible conscious experiences are. So you're seeing the fundamental building blocks of any conscious experience are made up of these fleeting, ephemeral phenomena: sights, sounds, tastes, touches, smells, thoughts, feelings, perceptions, different kinds of consciousness arising and passing away. Nothing inherent in any of it, nothing solid. As a result of that process, and I'm really concertining a very extended and deep exploration here, but I'm just getting to the gist as quickly as I can. That process showed me that no action that I perform, no action of volition taken with a view of self, will produce the cessation of suffering, because whatever is produced will likewise be ephemeral, transient, unsatisfactory, ungraspable, non-self. So it brings you to the point of the end of the 4th path, with the 4th path fruition, and we can go into Vipassana meditation as much as you like. If you'd like me to explain the progress of insight, I'm quite happy to do that. So, end of the 4th path. There is no attachment to anything in the phenomenal world. There is nothing, no experience that could possibly resolve the problem of suffering. And suffering here, this very subtle point of a spiritual training, this suffering is simply the lack of true knowing, of true understanding. So I was left with this sense that I had done everything it was possible to do in order to realize enlightenment, but I knew I wasn't enlightened. I knew that I hadn't realized the truth of things. So my teacher was brilliant with me. It was just setting me puzzles. What is it that you do that an enlightened being would never do? Questions like that. And I couldn't answer those. Well, how will I know? Because you genuinely know that you do not know, and yet you've gone through the entirety of the insight path that was supposed to produce this enlightenment, and it hasn't worked. But this is what the insight path has actually done is removed all the attachment to the phenomenal world, all the attachment to the appearance of things, all attachment, right the way down. The gestalt of what it is to be a human being, the emotional, the psychological, the physical, the intellectual, the higher planes of existence, all of it, gone through all of it, and had abandoned attachment to it all, except for one thing: the idea of enlightenment itself. So I hadn't stopped. There was still wanting, they were still looking, but for now, for something so ephemeral, there had to be one last surrender, one last giving up, one last letting go, which has to be absolutely unpremeditated, unsought after, unselfish, unself-centered, not self-orientated at all. So it is a totally spontaneous giving up and letting go. And for me, that came when I read a sutta, Buddhist sutta, called The Gold Refiner, in which the Buddha talks about the monk. How did he put it? Yes, the Buddha says the monk sets his mind up ready. The monk sets his mind up ready. So I understood that on a level that I had never. I'd read that sutta so many times. It's a very good sutta. And I had never understood that phrase in that way before. The monk sets his mind up ready. Oh, so what is that? So that's resting, content in the moment, watching things rise and pass away. What's the difference now? Because the whole of the path has been traversed, because there has been this thorough surrender of all attachments to all levels of being, all aspirations, all desires, all wants, all dislikes, everything, all been seen to be unworthy of any kind of grasping whatsoever. So there's a difference now. It's setting things up, but without now the desire for enlightenment. The monk sets his mind up ready. Ready for what? Ready to watch. Oh, you just set your mind up ready to watch. And it was in that perfectly natural state of just resting content in the moment, so not wanting anything, but with perfect attention, watching things arise and pass away. There was nothing riding upon it, because I had surrendered the last desire, which was the desire to know, the desire to understand. So there was just watching. And finally, therefore, there was no ignoring. Just resting content, watching. No one was watching. No one was doing the watching. There was just resting content, watching. The idea of self and desire are utterly entwined. Where there's no desire, there's no self-view. Think about it. Think about the times when you are free of desire. You'll find that you're not thinking about yourself. You're not burdened with self-centeredness at that time. So this was a state of just simple, pure being with perfect attention, but free of selfish inclination. Now, it's into that stoppedness, if I can put it like that, that the simple truth of the true nature of being is what remains. And so it just, oh, how could I not have seen it? How could I not have seen it? But here's the thing, right? So what everyone's going to do, if you've got any sense what you'll do is you'll sit down, you'll clear your mind, and you go, right, I'll just look at things rise and pass away without any desires. And guess what? Won't work. It will not work. It only worked, if you can put it like that, worked. It was non-working, wasn't it? It was not doing. The truth was was there to be seen because of all the prior work that had been done. The countless hours of careful examination of experience as it's arising, of learning to properly map and know the true nature of conscious experience, both internally, externally. That's what Vipassana meditation is doing, and it brings you to that point where that stopping is possible. But if you try to do it while you still got attachments, deep-rooted attachments you don't perhaps even know that you have, it's the path that does all the work at untangling all those attitudes and attachments and clingings to the physical world, to the mental world, to all the spiritual dimensions to life, the whole of one's being, the whole thing, from the most sort of visceral, physical, profane aspects of human existence, right to the most exalted spiritual dimensions of being. All of it has to be gone through and understood and let go of. Then what the non-path teachers say, oh, there's nothing you can do, then that becomes relevant. That's my opinion, based on my experience. So now we have to consider that there is, in order to reach that absolute stopping, what we do is we learn how to temporarily stop the turning of the wheel of Paticca Samuppada. That's what we do when we learn to meditate. It's a temporary stopping of that self-centered flow. In Buddhist meditation, we talk about the hindrances. These are mental obstructions, all based in forms of wanting life to be different than it is. Sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, worry and doubt. So when we learn to meditate, what we're learning is how to temporarily still and calm the mind, to let go of those inclinations temporarily so that the mind can rest content in the moment. But it's at that point, so that's why on a mundane level, on a conventional level, we have to understand Paticca Samuppada. So you have to understand how these habitual tendencies like worry, like hatred, arise, why they arise, how it is that past actions and present supporting conditions give rise to these hindrances now, and what happens if we act out of them, and how that affects the mind going into the future. And we have to learn how to, because that's all bound up in ignoring, and so we have to learn all about how Paticca Samuppada works, how contacts based on sense media give rise to feelings, which give rise to the passionate desire for life to be different than it is, and how that then produces further results which are unsatisfactory, and how we get caught in these cycles of habitual behaviour, and how to resolve those. So Paticca Samuppada can show us all about fear and anxiety and depression and irritability and the whole gamut of human ills. So and as a side note, this is why it's so important to be taught mindfulness properly, and to be taught mindfulness properly is to say you have to look at your suffering, you have to take responsibility for your actions, you have to be willing to go through the suffering of learning about how it is that you create your own distress. This is the process, these are the links. Learn to observe these, learn to be mindful of them, mindfully noting what's actually taking place, and you develop the wisdom sufficient that on a temporary basis you can surrender that volitional behaviour that produces suffering. You then So in the absence of the hindrances, on a temporary basis, keep saying this, temporary basis, you then create this sense of contentment in the moment, free of conflicted thinking, which allows you to then attend more deeply to labeling, exploring, and coming to understand all the components that go to make up any conscious experience, which we call the five aggregates. Again, we can go into that into any amount of detail that you want, but it's through the careful examination, through noting, mindful noting of your conscious experience, that you start to recognize, you start to apprehend and comprehend the three marks of existence: the transient, unsatisfactory, and conditioned nature of all experiences. And it's that process that leads to this deeper relinquishing of attachments and reaching this true place of spiritual maturity, which then allows for this absolute stopping to take place. And it's that then that in the absence of all that selfish preoccupation, the unoriginated truth of being, of existence, is what remains. And it's more important than anything. And people live out their lives chasing ephemera, trying to prove that the world is flat or that the world is a globe. I got news for you. The world sits on the back of 4 tortoise. The world is a cube. The world is triangular. It doesn't matter. All that just doesn't matter. Unless, of course, you really need to go through all of that to discover that none of that's important. And really, you're either in 2 camps. You're either in the very, very small camp of having consciously recognised that nothing is worth chasing other than the truth. I was in that camp. Or you're not, in which case you are busy chasing other stuff in the belief that they can genuinely bring you the true peace and happiness and contentment that you're looking for. Once somebody has tried as many things as they care to, then they then do and move towards the truth, but it's only really ever as a last gambit, because people's pride and hubris, conceit, arrogance, their failure to recognise that there is a deeper, more significant aspect to life than the mere appearance of things and chasing of ephemeral pleasures and so forth. There's so much in people's way to reach that point. So it's unfortunately, and it's a shame, but it is bitter experience in the end that forces somebody to change their minds and head towards the truth. And so in the last analysis, that suffering that they have to endure is absolutely right for them. So it's all perfect as it is. Yeah, so that's stopping then in slightly more detail. So I thought it would be really, really useful. I think that there are 2 aspects that immediately come to mind that we have to cover. So first of all is using Paticca Samuppada as a way of coming to understand why there is this conventional level of unhappiness in people's lives. So using Paticca Samuppada to come to understand why and how fear emerges, why and how anxiety arises, how to deal with stress, how to deal with loneliness, why things like radical views and discrimination occur, and how it is that perceptions are always being reinforced, and so what a tight net people get trapped in because they don't understand the process. So there's so much just on a mundane level of living out a human life that you can use Paticca Samuppada for in order to come to live a happier life, a freer life. And then there's the progress of insight, Vipassana meditation, which deals with the deeper roots of clinging attachment and how to surrender those. So it seems to me that there's an awful lot we can talk about. But anyway, gosh, I've been talking a long time on this one. I hope that was enjoyable. I hope it was helpful. I just felt it well up that I really needed to talk about this in more detail. If you've got any questions, observations, then please do post them in the comments section below. Also, just to point out, if you'd like to get emails of when I post a new video, you do actually have to click on the notification bell, which is situated, should be there, down there somewhere, below. The notification bell, which is sat next to the subscribe button. So if you notice that bell and you ring that bell, as it were, then you will get an email notification when I put a video up. So until the next time, take care.